Hello and welcome to Married in a Year. My name is Liza Chuma Akunyili. If you have been on the streets of social media and you have been posting about dating like I have, or you've been focusing on meeting people on social media, one of the kinds of posts you would have seen are posts where people say things like, I don't want to date, I just want to get married. Let's just skip everything and get a courtship. I don't want to go on the first date. I just want an engagement. What people are saying is that they want to skip the tension. Interestingly, what's planned for today is living in the tension. To want love is very scary because it makes someone who does not have context for the life you were born into, the life you grew up with, the peculiarities of your lived experiences, the difficulties of your present moments. That person is going to waltz into your life and demand standards from you that you may or may not have even considered up until now. Someone who is a total stranger, even if they are your best friend, and this is about to be best friend to romance, right? They still have not lived your life, even if they have lived parts of your life with you. The thoughts in your mind, those things are about to become more public, which is why people who marry their best friends have both sides of the coin. They have the good sides of the coin because they have someone who already understands them, who already knows them, whom they've already allowed their intrusive thoughts, as we call them in 2026, to be open, to be manifested in front of that person. So to then share life with that person is easy. But for the rest of us, because we will all not marry our best friends, unfortunately, there is the tension of wanting love, but also being scared of love. And so one of the ways people manage that is by ignoring love completely. Ignoring love is a choice. It's a technique and it works. When people ask you, when do you want to get married? And you say, oh, you don't know, whenever. That's not your problem right now. You're focusing on this, you're focusing on that. What you're doing is that you are ignoring this source of tension. 1,000 people are realistically not asking you about your marriage except you're a celebrity. 10 people or 5 key people in your life are constantly asking about your relationship, asking about your relationship status. And because you're tired of answering the question or you don't like it, the way in which the question is asked, you shun them, and as a consequence, you shut down your thoughts about relationship as well. And so for the average 30-year-old, when they come to relationship, their first thought, or many times their manifested thought, is that dating is something that is a pressure conversation. Sometimes it's pressure other people are putting on them. Some other times it's internal pressure based off the external pressure they have absorbed. And so in order to quell that pressure, people shun relationships completely. But it is difficult to hope for something and shun it simultaneously. That's what I feel like we are ill prepared for, both in society, outside of religious and spiritual context, and when we come into spiritual and religious environments. So we have ministers in church who tell you things like, oh, get married. You should be married by now. But none of them are really walking you through the pressure you have absorbed. And so now that you have a deep desire for marriage, you're not sure if this desire is genuinely yours or if it's external pressure. You see this tension? This tension will never go away. This tension is about dealing with, oh, I really, really, really want marriage without being desperate. Oh, I'm so sure that I want marriage for myself that the external pressure does not bother me, meaning 1,000 people even can ask me about marriage and I have an answer for them, and the answer I give to them is not influenced by the 1,000 questions. This balance in between, to truly desire and not pretend like we do not desire, is a tough place to be in. And I'm not going to try and philosophize this one. I think we're just going to go into scriptures. Going forward, we're going to compress the prayer into the episodes if there's a need for us to pray. In the Garden of Gethsemane, something really outstanding came to my notice reading the scripture, Jesus at the Garden of Gethsemane. When Jesus comes to pray, Jesus brings his friends to pray with him. Jesus, you know that God already has made up his mind about his will. You came to earth to fulfill that will. There is no prayer Peter is going to pray over the next 1 hour that is going to change the eternal will of God. The Bible describes Jesus as the lamb that was slain from the foundations of the earth. So pray, explain to me why that same lamb is in the Garden of Gethsemane, negotiating that same will, negotiating that same slaying. Why is the lamb that was slain, not will be slain, the lamb that was slain from the foundations of the earth, why is he at the Garden of Gethsemane negotiating with God? Not only did he come alone, he came with his friends. And when his friends slept off, he went back to them and said, couldn't you watch with me for 1 hour? Okay. Now Jesus goes back into the garden to pray. And the Bible says that he was saying to God, if you will, let this cup pass over me. So wait, there is a cup. But what Jesus was saying to the Father is, I have a will and I have a desire. And my desire is that this cup passes over me, that I don't drink from this cup. For many of us, when it comes to relationship, instead of us starting the prayer and starting our conversations and starting our thoughts and starting our truth with, I do have a desire. And this is the nature of my desire. We start it with, oh, I don't have a desire, so whatever comes. Then when whatever comes, we start to complain. What this looks like in the dating pool is, I don't really care about love. I'm not focused on relationship. I remember seeing someone's post recently who said something along the lines of, oh, they are working on themselves. And I was looking at the post and thinking, and now I don't know this person personally, so I'm not necessarily critiquing what they posted. But I was looking at it and the question that popped up in my head is, when do you know you've done enough? When would you have realized that you've taken care of yourself enough? When will you realize that you've self-developed enough? When would you have evolved enough? When would you have cared for yourself enough? When would you have watched your health enough? How much money in your bank account will be enough? So we put relationship on the back burner as if it's not something we desire. We put it on the back burner as if it's not something we yearn for. We put every other thing in front publicly. Then behind the scenes, and this is for some people, not applicable to everybody, behind the scenes, we then realize that with relationship is a big deal and it's gnawing at us at the back of our minds. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus came to the Father and said, see, Daddy, the fact is, I don't want this cup of suffering. My will, my wish, which obviously does not tally with your own, is for this cup to pass over me. For you, romantically, what that looks like is, Lord, I want to get married without the influence of these 10 people asking me questions, without the influence of these 100 people bothering me, without the influence of these 1,000 people who are always in my business because I have a big platform, without the 50,000 bloggers who post about me. If you're someone who has a big platform or someone who is doing work that is public facing and who is a leader, you have more people in your business. You have to be honest enough with yourself and with God to say, I want love, but I want it without all these people's influence. Lord, I want to hear what you're saying. Now, it is difficult at this point to hear what the Lord is saying because you have your will. So we go back to the Garden of Gethsemane. What does Jesus do? Jesus wrestles his will and God's will. The Bible says that he prayed until his sweat was like blood. I'm not going to go into the theology of what it means or the significance or the medicine of the blood vessels. I don't know enough of it. What I do know though is that it takes a certain kind of mental wrestling, emotional contention, physical wrestling even to sweat and sweat hard. Many of us have not done the sweating hard of our will and God's will. What would that look like for you? It is taking one day out and sitting with God and saying, Lord, this is what everyone else is saying. in the deep, 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 deep pits of my belly. This is what I'm saying. This is what I want. And sometimes you don't even know what you want. So you have to wrestle with God to find what you want. And then, God, I want to know what you are saying. And however long it takes you, I know that every time I come to prayer on this platform, or whether it's the general prayers we're having on Instagram or the private prayer courses that are on Mainstack, whatever it is, you notice that I always reference extended prayers. And the reason is because as adults, we are crowded. We are very internally crowded. I'll give you a good example. I'll return back to what I was saying. I was on Instagram the other day. I'd gone offline and then I came online to do something. I got distracted and I'd scrolled past a couple of reels, give and take, maybe about 10 reels. And I looked at the time. I'd been online for barely 7 minutes. I have not been online for 7 minutes and I already have pop-ups from 10 different people's lives. I already have suggestions from 10 different people's lives. So imagine what it would take me to declutter after I come off after 7 minutes. Imagine being on those platforms for 1 hour. We are a very, very noisy bunch. And so extended prayers are not necessarily about speaking to God. They are about quieting down. That quieting down is also a kind of prayer because it's a willingness to get into where God is. That said, you have to make a decision to find your Gethsemane moment with God, where you live in the tension of what people are saying, what you are saying, and what God is saying. If I was to reference myself, I will use this example. When I came out of my last relationship, I realized, I stopped aiming for a lot of things in the course of this relationship. You know what? I'm not going to do anything until I go ahead and get my master's and this and that. And I remember that I'd set a certain age after that and said I was not even going to bother up until that age. And a certain person in my life was wrestling me on it and saying, but this is not what you wanted even before now. Why are you going this far? I get that you're hurt and all, but this is unnecessary. That person was giving me great advice. I'm grieving the best way I know how. But the Lord was saying something completely different from what both of us were saying. And I know because when the Lord eventually gives me a word and I go back to that same person did not fully agree with the Lord. So my Garden of Gethsemane moment will be to wrestle my way of processing grief, what this person is giving me as a good advice and a good suggestion versus what the Lord is saying. Many of us have outsourced this process to the person with the loudest voice in our lives. So if people are saying, oh, you look good with so and so person, now you're feeling perhaps I should consider. I'm not saying the Lord cannot use people's voices. But you cannot say, oh, I don't want the tension at all, so I shut down completely and I'm not listening to anybody. Or you decide, oh, I'm going to go with what every other person is saying. Or you punish yourself. The reason some people are single has nothing to do with whether they want love or not. Is that is the easiest way they know how to manage the pressure. If people love you, they are going to say things. If nobody's asking you when you're getting married, nobody likes you. I'm sorry. If they do, they will ask. If they don't ask, they will attempt to set you up. If they don't attempt to set you up, they'll be concerned about you. Their way of manifesting that concern may be in questions, in conversations, in telling their friends about you, but that concern will come out one way or the other. And so if you shut down the people in your life because you think you're trying to cut off pressure, what you're simultaneously doing is that you're cutting off the support system the Lord has given you. These people are humans like you. They are flawed and they will go beyond their boundaries at some point. You also cannot shut yourself down. And so you are going to have to make a choice today, which is all this episode is about. I'm done. If I continue after now, I'm rambling. You need a Garden of Gethsemane moment. And how do you Garden of Gethsemane appropriately? You identify that you have a will. You bring your will before the Lord and you stay with the Lord until the sovereignty of the Lord is lifted above your choices and lifted above your desire. So you've said to yourself, I'm not going to get married until I'm in my 40s. But Lord is saying, I want you married at 31. Or you've said to yourself, oh, I'm going to get married at 31. And Lord is saying, no, I need you to get married at 40. Or you're saying, oh, you know what? I'm not going to write my book until I'm married. And Lord is saying, no, I need you to write the book because that's how the spouse will find you. Or you're saying, I don't want to buy a house until I'm married. And the Lord is saying, oh no, buy a house. The process of buying a house is how you find your spouse. You have to agree that there's tension somewhere and bring that tension before the Lord. Shutting down or being overly open is not the wise choice. The wise choice is where the Lord is. If you stay at your Garden of Gethsemane like Jesus did, you will eventually come to this point. Not my will. Not my will. When you do make that statement, you will make it with so much confidence that even if 1,000 people come against you, even if it feels like life is whipping your back and the dating pool is messy and this is out of place, and you would have enough courage, enough confidence in the God you met. There are certain things you cannot convince me about relationship-wise because I did not come to them in one day. Some of them, I came to them in 6 years. Some of them I journeyed in prayer about. Some of them I had to stay in my word for. There's this thing I used to say in the house that the Archpope cannot convince me about. There are certain things an Archpope, and I know there's no Archpope, but yeah, I'm just saying if there's one, there are certain things they can't convince me about because I wrestled my way into those things. For those of you that have been saying, oh, I don't have a this, we'll get to that, I think 3 weeks from now. Whatever it is that is a tension in the dating pool that is making you want to abscond from marriage, you are going to have to confront it, because if you don't, you will never fully come into the will of God. You will either live in the will of other people or you will live in the will of yourself. And many times both of those options are not the best options. The Lord's option, though, will give you everything you want and everything the Lord wants. And that sounds like a better deal any day of the week, actually. So until next week when I see you, do have a phenomenal day. Bye.